Europe is slowly outperforming the S&P 500, which is something new compared to all of 2016.
Welcome back, Bruno.
Good morning, Kias.
Are we getting any signals that the equity uptrend is over?
Well, let's look at the S&P daily charts. It's true that already for a few weeks, last 2 weeks, we said the correction should be soon over. In fact, what we had is a decline close to the former low in beginning of September. And here, the picture doesn't look very bullish yet, even though we have a spike and it rebounded and it starts to move up a little bit with momentum moving up.
So, well, is that enough for it to become more bullish?
You see, if you look at the S&P 500 here, we could anticipate a little bit what's happening. First, on the top part, what we noticed is that during the spike down last week, we did not make a new high on the VIX. So it is a lower high. That means that it's not sure that really VIX will explode on the upside and that the S&P could really go all the way down to 2070. On the other hand, if we look at this marginal new low here between October and September, we've got on the oscillator something which could become as a bullish divergence, and that means that the correction could be already over here, moving upwards. From the 2120 levels toward the 2193 and then up later into 2017.
So it seems you have more bullish news. So where else is it?
Well, it's true that in the US they were not there so clearly as it seems to appear on the Euro stocks. Because here we just had the chance to yesterday have a kind of a small breakup of a resistance trend line. And the momentum is also moving up. So together with the relative strengths here on the top part, which is rising, that means that Europe is slowly outperforming the S&P 500, which is something new compared to all of 2016. We could get the signal from this side of the market.
So are you seeing a similar picture in other markets?
Well, let's look at Japan, which is the other side also of the developed market, which could help the global picture improve. We see something similar. Relative strength of Japan versus the S&P 500 is also rising, and it's still rising despite a yen which is about flat and not declining even more. And here on the, compared to the technical situation of the Nikkei versus the cloud, we are already above the cloud compared to the Euro stocks, and we are coming close to this 17,000 psychological level, and once we are above it, with one or two close above it, it should open the upside more clearly. And the momentum is also rising similarly to Europe.
So is this the case for all emerging markets?
Well, let's start with the one which is really doing well, which is Brazil. Here we see that not only we are above the clouds, not only are we making a new higher high, and we have a relative strength which is improving versus the S&P 500 and other emerging market. But this doesn't the case for China, where we are still in the trailing range. We're not making a new high yet, but we are holding just barely above the cloud. So let's say the bullish situation remains with an upside momentum turning up. So we can hope that the relative strength versus the S&P 500 that we have here on the top part of the panel rising already versus the S&P 500 is going also to catch up from flat to rising versus other emerging market.
So what's happening on the US interest rate side?
Well, the US interest rate side has probably caused or produced, if you wish, this correction that we've got here from mid-September into October, because interest rates have moved from 150 to 180. Now the rise is relatively steep in a short period of time, and now we are pulling back a little. Probably this pullback is going to last a little bit more into mid-October, late October, and going into the 165, 170 percentage area. So let's not mix up. We have an uptrend, that's clear. This is just a pullback in an uptrend, and the medium-term uptrend will continue.
So will the financials be hurt by a pullback?
Well, in theory, financials should just also pull back a little. That's what's happening here on the sector side of the financials, which represent mostly the banks. But the relative strength versus the S&P is holding pretty well. So we notice that the market is basically banking on the fact that the long-term rates are improving, rising, and that improves the margin as well. And therefore, it's not pulling back much. So I think here, this is a positive sign because we see that when we have pullback on interest rates, still the financial anticipate more rising later on.
And when could we see an uptrend in earnest?
Well, it should happen right now. That would be the good news. It has to be confirmed in the next days. But what we look for is certainly to have a move not only on the financials but also on other sectors. And what we have been looking for now a few months already since the midsummer is this head and shoulder on the oil patterns, which is testing now again 51 level and should break up and help the sector from energy in the US to outperform even more the S&P 500. That should help the industrial as well, because it implies basically that growth is coming back.
And finally, what's the story with gold?
Well, gold is very quiet. As we see here, after a big move from 1310 to 1245, in the last 2 weeks, nothing happened. What we should focus on is the fact that we have already reached oversold area. We are close to the lower Bollinger Bands, and maybe we are not getting much deeper price pullback to accumulate on this uptrend, which is basically what we've got since the beginning of 2016. So in the coming days or coming weeks, probably it's worth noticing if gold is not trying again to outperform. If it's going to rise and rebound, that could also mean that the US dollar is going to stay in a relatively stable trading range and not rising so much. So that would be good for emerging market, and that will be good for our bullish scenario, all in all, for the coming months until the year end.
Always, Bruno, it was a pleasure having you in the studio.
You're welcome, yes.
And thank you at home for watching. Don't forget you can catch Bruno's previous programmes by clicking on our channel. Goodbye for now.